everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started right now. Okay, guilty of second-degree murder, very different than her first trial. Let's break it down right now in this entire trial with our special guest this morning, forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan is back with us. Joseph, great to see you.
Good morning, my friend. How are you? I
am good. So, Melanie Eam, the jury wasn't confused this time around. They found her guilty of second-degree murder. Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, a little bit. But the jury has spoken, have they not? And they came back pretty quickly with this. This wasn't a protracted trial. It's very decisive on their part. So I think the sum total of the evidence that was placed before them, they came back with a verdict in this trial, second degree, not manslaughter.
So there must have been something about that crime scene where they felt that, this wasn't somebody else who did it. They really didn't believe Guy Hand was the one who did this. Now, what do you think about the crime scene? Did they really hit upon that said there's absolutely no way this other guy could have done it?
I can't necessarily answer that. I think that, again, it's the sum total of everything that had occurred there within that crime scene. I'm still drawn back to that rather stout blade that we saw with the bent tip, and that she was able to facilitate the stabbing of this young man over and over and over again. Now, I know that this is driven by passion, but I don't know how far the defense went in kind of probing this area as much as they should have.
Speaking of the defense, let's start with the defense's opening statement. So if anybody hasn't seen this was the defense's argument about why Melanie Eam is not guilty. She's not the one who did this, but really it was another individual. Take a look.
Listen to the testimony from Guy Hand that he locked all the doors from the inside. More specifically, the glass door, which cannot be opened other than from the inside. Listen to the evidence of the Maryland policeman doing a welfare check and getting the answer, "I'm afraid." You're going to interpret the evidence as you see fit. That's your job. You took an oath. I'm sure you'll do it well and you'll do it correctly. The one question that you have to get by before you even consider Melanie Eam is, why did Guy Hand pick up the bloody murder, accidental, whatever it is, the weapon with which he stabbed James Berry?
All right, welcome back, everybody. So let's talk now with Joseph Scott Morgan about this. You're listening to the defense's claim that it was really Guy Hand who did this. And Joseph, I got to ask you a quick question, if I can. You had mentioned something, I think a few days ago, how he's a much bigger individual, and the amount of force that needed to be used to commit this crime, it would probably make more sense that he would do it as opposed to Melanie Eam, who is much smaller.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of my point. Even the proportional images that you see with Miss Eam and the victim, he's a total head taller than she is. She's not a very large woman, and Mr. Hand, on the other hand, no pun intended, he is rather stout, and so it's kind of an interesting dynamic that you have here. Another thing that plays into this from an evidentiary standpoint is the shirt that she was wearing that they made a lot of hay about relative to. There was a single drop of the victim's blood on it.
Yeah.
And in this case, this is a very, very bloody case, Jesse.
Yeah, I want to talk about that shirt, but let's just first go to Neil Zielinski, the Palm Beach County crime scene investigator, who kind of talked a little bit more about these items of evidence, and then Joseph and I will break it down. Take a look at this.
What we see in States 23, if you could orient us for this.
So this is taken from inside the hallway. My back would be kind of towards the bedrooms, and that's looking out over into the kitchen to the left, and then that front door would be over where my pointer is directing.
Can you show us on the diagram, please?
So I would be standing roughly around here, and then the picture that you saw would be photographing this area here.
And looking at stage 25, where was this photograph shot?
That's in the hallway, right at the edge of the entrance of the hallway, by the kitchen, leading over by the front door.
Yeah, can you show us on the diagram where you are in that photograph?
So I'm standing in this general area over here.
Okay. You can tell us what vantage point this is and what two items of evidence are being shown in this photograph.
The vantage point would be taken from within the kitchen, about the center of the kitchen, looking out to the front door where the where the red pointer is now. There's two things on the ground that have numbers on them. The number 2 over here, that was marked. That was used to mark the clump of hair that we just talked about.
Okay.
And then,
And let me just stay on that for a second. I'll show you states 35. Does that show that clump of hair that's being marked with a yellow number?
yes,
And then it states 37, of course, up here with that.
yes.
All right, Joseph, as you said, tons of blood in this case, all throughout the crime scene. And you had mentioned before I had to cut you off, the idea of blood on specifically her item of clothing, her shirt. What did you make of that again?
Well, it's not just the blood that was there, it's the blood that wasn't there, because it was, in this case, as you can see, there is blood everywhere. We've got evidence of spatter on the walls, and there's droplets in the hallway. And then, of course, where he is found, there's a tremendous amount of blood there as well. So this is a very dynamic event that's occurred. I think one of the things that's very compelling here is the fact that that clump of hair is laying on the floor. And in my estimation, there was a grappling event that probably took place at this point in time. A tuft of hair was removed, and the individual is being controlled by the hair like this while they are being stabbed. So I think that paints a rather gruesome picture for the jury in this particular case. But still, we have this unanswered question of how did she get so free and clear of this blood? Did she clean up? Did somebody help her clean up? Did she change clothes? And if she did, why did she wind up with one droplet of blood on those clothes?
Yeah, and I know we only have about 30 seconds or so, but I guess the question is it possible that even stabbing someone, it doesn't create that explosion of blood that we see in movies?
It's not necessarily an explosion, Jesse. I hate to term it that way because that is very Hollywood. I like to think of it more as a transfer, because as I've mentioned time and time again, as you and I have discussed cases like this is a very intimate event. You're up close. You're not at some distance doing this, so you're right with them, and it's rather intellectually stimulating.
Well, that's why I like to have you on, because to break it down, because we all have different assumptions of what this crime scene would look like or should look like. I'll tell you what, let's take a break. When we come back, we have a lot more to dissect in the Melanie Eam trial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're recapping the Melanie Eam trial here today. We played you the verdict earlier before that she was found guilty of second-degree murder, and we're trying to understand, how did the jury reach their verdict? Well, one of the things to remember with the Melanie Eam trial is that she had left Florida and went to Maryland to visit family when she was confronted by police about her alleged involvement at the time in the James Barry killing. So this was recorded through body cam footage of a Maryland police officer. If you haven't seen this interaction, you really should, because it's important to understand what was going on in her mind. And the defense will say, she was just a scared girl. She wasn't a suspect. Really? Take a look.
Hi, Melanie. We got a call from that you were okay. Some people concerned about you. This work or something. So, okay. All right. Okay. We just want to check. So we'll come back and knock on your door, Mom, and give you all the information. You have any questions for us, Melanie?
I'm just wondering, when should I go in for the questioning?
Yeah, we haven't been told anything. Like I said, they just wanted us to talk to you about, make sure physically and emotionally you are fine as well. Okay? Do you have any other questions for us? What's going on, Melanie? Okay. What are you scared about? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll be right back. If you have any further questions for us, like I said, we'll be back to knock on the door. If anything comes up in between that time, please don't hesitate to ask us or let us know what's going on. Okay?
Two ways to look at that. If you think that Melanie Eam did it, then she's scared because she did it. She's getting caught. The other way to look at it is if you take the defense's side, that she's scared because she escaped a house where her then boyfriend was brutally murdered by his mother's boyfriend. So there's two ways to look at that. Joseph, though, my question to you is you've seen a number of different investigations. This one is involving two different jurisdictions, right? You have somebody who left Florida and went to Maryland. In your experience, do these investigations get messy? Is it tough to extradite somebody? And the idea of trying to collect evidence from one crime scene and then you try to find the suspect somewhere else, does it get kind of messy?
Yeah, it can, because, time is of the essence, particularly when you're talking about fragile biological evidence. If she has traveled to that location, which is, as we all know, a great distance, things can be lost along the way. And these police officers, though I'm sure they're doing a fine job, they really don't know what they're walking into here. They don't know the rattle and hum that has taken place down in Florida. The one police officer there that you can see full on in the camera, he has an awareness that something horrible probably has happened on the other end. He wouldn't be out there. Trust me, they know. And he's thinking, what's going on here? He's kind of worried. And so along with that, you don't know what's going on with the evidence. If you're the investigator down in Florida, you know that she not only has evidence relative to what she's witnessed, but also she can possess physical evidence that she may have carted off with her. And it's very, very difficult from a logistics standpoint just to pull this thing off as an investigator.
Yeah, because so many times someone's arrested at the scene or they're taken into custody at the scene, and it's a little interesting how this whole situation unfolded. Now, we can't keep talking about the fact that the defense pointed the finger at Guy Hand, really, that he was the one who killed James Barry. Well, you know what we saw? Guy Hand taking the stand. Take a look.
Night. Besides that, was it just a typical average night?
Yes.
Did you go to bed? Do you remember around what time you went to bed?
Yeah, 11-ish. I'd taken a nap early that day, so I was kind of awake.
Do you remember if, because you'd taken a nap, if you took any medication that night?
Yes, I'd taken a half of a Valium.
And is that something that's prescribed to you?
Yes, it is.
At some point after you've fallen asleep around the 11-ish hour, do you wake up to something unusual? What do you hear?
Yes, I hear screaming, a loud noise, a bang, or something like that.
And when you hear the screaming, where is it coming from?
Outside of our door. I'm not sure at that point, because our door was shut.
But at the point you said Nicola, did she come into the room too?
Oh, yes.
And was she right behind you coming into the room?
Yes.
And when she came into the room, did you hear, I know you said you don't know who called 911, but at some point, could you hear that 911 was being called?
Oh, yes.
Could you hear someone talking to 911?
Yes, I could. Someone was talking to 911, and then I could hear the dispatcher.
Okay, so Joseph, one of the more strange aspects of this whole situation is that Guy Hand at one point took that knife and brought it back to the kitchen. It's also been said that at one point he washed his hands. He's also been questioned, at least by the defense, about if he's trained in CPR, he didn't do the proper protocol to save the life of James Barry, even though it might not have been possible. Those 3 points, what's your reaction to that?
Well, first off, if you're covered in blood, you're a civilian, you're not thinking about evidentiary considerations at that point in time. What you want to do is get as much distance between you and that blood that's staining your hands. So I don't think that's out of the norm. I think that it can be easily explained that the knife was removed from that area because if he perceived that there was a danger of some kind, he took it into the kitchen. Now, whether or not he washed it off or cleaned it to any degree to try to destroy evidence, I have no idea. I think that it's that this kind of resonates as far as the CPR. It's kind of thin to me for this reason. I don't know. It's not like when you go and take a Red Cross class in CPR that it's automatic muscle response training that kicks in like you're in special operations in the military. This is something you were trained in maybe months and months, maybe a couple of years ago, and I don't know that I could keep the order. I've been certified several times, and they keep changing the order of everything. So, I might do it in one way, and somebody might do it another way. So a lot of this stuff can be easily explained. Interesting.
Well, we have a lot more of Guy Hand on the stand right after our next break. So you know what I'm going to say. Stay tuned here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back. Crime, everybody. We're talking about the Melanie Eam retrial. We told you earlier that she was found guilty of second-degree murder yesterday for fatally stabbing her ex-boyfriend, James Barry, 21 years old, to death. Now, we're trying to understand how the jury ultimately reached that conclusion. The defense put forward the theory that it wasn't Melanie Eam who committed this crime, but a man named Guy Hand, the boyfriend of James Barry's mother. In fact, the theory they put forward was that Guy Hand got into an argument with the defendant about her on-again, off-again relationship with James Barry, and in an effort to protect Eam from Guy Hand, James Barry jumped in the middle and got stabbed. And it was either by accident or a form of negligence. This man, Guy Hand, took the stand and said this is not true. He did not stab Barry. So we saw Guy Hand take the stand. It was pretty interesting to watch. In case you haven't seen it, let's play a little bit more.
Did it appear that he had an injury to his chest?
Yes, right up here by his collarbone, somewhere around in there. And I gave him one breath, and the air come out of the hole. So I knew that he had definitely been stabbed through the lungs.
And is there a point where he's unconscious?
He died in my arms.
And as he's there, do you still stay with James until the police come in?
Yes, I'm still in that room.
Mr. Hand?
Yes.
Did you stab James Barry?
No, ma'am. I would not do that. I loved him.
I don't have any additional questions.
You may step down. Can you move? Yes, you may step down.
Well, that's the defense's man, the one that they say is the real killer, on the stand, tearfully explaining how he would not do this. Joseph, the theory put forward by the state is that this was a jilted lover, took matters into her own hands, and killed her boyfriend because he broke up with her. Ex-boyfriend. Have you seen cases, the brutality, these kinds of cases, for that kind of rationale, young love like this?
Yeah, multiple times. And I teach my students at Jacksonville State that they're more at risk for their own lives with the person that's lying in bed with them next to them than they are from some stranger down a dark alley somewhere. because most of these events, these homicides that we work like this, particularly domestics, are some of the most dangerous because they're filled with passion, they're filled with anger, they're filled with rage, they're filled with jealousy. And there's a reason it's called the green-eyed monster. It raises its head. And in this case, you've got a case of multiple stab wounds. I'm still unclear as to the complete dynamics of this, but this was very rage-filled, whoever killed this gentleman, because it just wasn't a single strike. It was multiple strikes. It's one of the reasons you've got a problem with this gentleman doing the CPR. You remember he's talking about doing the chest compressions, and every time he does, blood rises up, I would imagine, through his spread fingers. And one of the reasons is that you've got massive internal damage here, both to the lungs, possibly to the heart. So that compression is causing it to come out. You've got 911 telling him do chest compressions, and every time he compresses that chest, the closer this kid gets to death. It's a catch-22 situation.
It's just awful. Just awful when you think about the state he was in, his age, just really, really awful. But one of the things we saw too in this case was not just the testimony of Guy Hamm, but we heard from Melanie Eam. Now, she didn't take the stand, but we heard a recording of Melanie Eam's police interview. Really good insight into what was going on early in the case. Take a look.
Okay, regarding that's fine. Just explaining, people are going to wonder, why did she leave, or why did you?
I was just really scared. I wanted some advice, and I came there to my aunt and my uncle, to my cousin, and spoke to me, and they all said it's supposed to change something. I asked them, what should I do?
How many times did you stab?
I don't remember. It's not like a catfish, but
More than once.
I would say.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, what do you mean, where it got him, or
No, is it just where you made a motion with a knife for him?
I don't really remember, but it didn't last too long because he never.
I'm just confirming you got the knife out of the drawer. How long did you have the knife before you think or was it just like that, you grabbed the knife and you said?
It was instant.
Do you regret it?
Of course not.
I have to ask. He's not with.
So you remember the big thing there was that Melanie Eam allegedly confessed to this crime, and the question was whether or not that was coerced testimony or a coerced confession or not. My bigger question, though, for you, Joseph, is we also saw the testimony of the forensic pathologist, and I know that you've had an opportunity to see his statements. What did you make of that? Again, it's an understanding of what ultimately happened to James Barry.
So that they can understand this, I like word pictures. I'm kind of a slow guy. If they'll just think about their clavicle, their collarbone right here, and find their clavicle and go slightly below it, the first rib is right there. Okay. When she struck him with this knife, the knife actually passed between the clavicle and the first rib. And there's two major vessels in here. So she nicked these vessels that are kind of dropping off. There's a very critical vessel in there that's called the subclavian, which is where they put central lines in and stuff and heart attacks and all this sort of thing so they can administer drugs. Major vessel. And it also went into the top portion of the left lung. So this kid's got these two major things working against him. He talked about directionality. It's kind of going from left to right. It's obviously going from front to rear. So there's no question about that. I think that trying to get the attitude that she was in, I'm talking about the physical attitude when she struck him, was it something where she was atop him, or did she contact him, and was she face to face with him? And I'm curious about this tuft of hair now. I want to know, had she reached around and grabbed his hair and pulled it back and stabbed him in the chest? There's one more important thing here. Remember how we talked about the blade, and the blade is bent. Even in the pathologist's report, he states that the pathologist states that he's only seen a bent blade one time before, okay, and that this is kind of a rarity, but it can in fact happen, as was the case with this blade. So when this blade passed through, It struck a bony structure, all right? Now, we've got the clavicle at work here. We've got the first rib at work here. Passes through. He's talking about a 7-inch deep incision or stab wound. So very deep thing. If we have time, one more thing.
Well, Joseph, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Let's hold that thought. We have to take a quick break. And I'm glad you're mentioning these wounds, and you can help explain it, because when the investigator asked Eam, how many times did you stab Barry, she goes, I don't know, it's not like I counted. Let's take a break. Hold on to that thought. We'll come right back, and we'll talk more about the autopsy report. We'll be right back. Joseph, it's just like you said, the wounds, how they were sustained by James Barry, but there were some other points that you wanted to mention, including the fact that James Barry might have been protecting himself or tried to protect himself, and also I know you wanted to talk about the saturation of blood found on his shirt as well. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. We hear a lot about defensive wounds, and there's any number of types of wounds that are out there that you'll see. And one of the things I wanted to kind of demonstrate for you guys is the fact that when someone is involved in one of these very intimate types of events, and they have an awareness that they're being stabbed and attacked, we'll just imagine this pen, for instance, is a bladed instrument. It's a sharp instrument. If an individual is going to be stabbed, sometimes you'll get this kind of blocking motion that comes up, and they'll take the tip of the blade full into the palm of the hand. You'll also see them on the arms as well. Now, you can get swipes as well, which are in size. The forensic pathologists talked about the shallow depth of those. But in this young man's case, he's got incised wounds. And when we talk about incised, we're talking about slices. He's got incised wounds to the palms of both hands, which means during this confrontation, what happened is this young man literally grabbed the blade of the knife, and this blade was withdrawn from his hand. And when it did, it incised what we refer to as the palmar aspect of the hand. Now, the doctor does go into some depth in talking about how super saturated the shirt was. And if folks at home will just imagine that the shirt itself was acting as a sponge, if you will. We talk, the stab wounds that are going on, and also the compressions that are going on. Mr. Hand talked about how he saw blood coming up. Well, that blood is reabsorbed into the clothing. So that can possibly explain the absence of some of the blood on her, but it's really hard for me to buy into this idea that she's got one drop of blood on her clothing. Okay.
Yeah, and look, the jury came back guilty verdict, second-degree murder, and that's the conclusion of that, because it's really been a tragic case to follow. But when we come back, we'll talk about another case. Stay tuned.